Please be seated. We hear about two widows this morning. So Elijah had been hiding out in a canyon of a desert creek bed for who knows how long, being fed by ravens until the water ran out because of the drought. Imagine what Elijah must have been thinking when God interrupts his dreamy scenario to tell him that he should leave this comfy little creek bed and go to Zarephath in the land of Tyre and Sidon, where Jezebel, his recent archenemy, was from. Because God had prepared for a widow there to feed him and care for him. This must have seemed absurd to Elijah. A widow? Are you serious? How in the world could a widow take care of anybody but herself, if that? Of course, Elijah is used to God-type thinking, but still this is just like God saying to one of us that we should leave the Oklahoma Dust Bowl during the Depression and go to find an unemployed homeless person in Kansas City who is going to make sure we have food and shelter for the next couple of years. Why would we expect someone with no means to be able to come up with extra means? And yet, this is the task of the first widow that we are introduced to today. And she even has a son. Elijah emerges from his long foot journey through the wilderness looking like a wild man, and essentially forces this poor widow, who is giving up on life on her last handful of food, to take care of him, convincing her that God will take care of her and her son if she does. Well, God comes through. He pulls off the miracle of provision that he claims he's going to do for a good long while. Then suddenly the widow's son becomes deathly ill. We're not told that he dies, but that he is at death's door, that he has stopped breathing. And as far as the widow can tell, he will be dead before the day is over. We meet another widow in today's scriptures. She too has a son, but this widow's son has died. We encounter her as Jesus encounters her, walking with a large crowd of followers into the town of Nain. Jesus and his high-energy, upbeat procession comes face to face with a very different crowd, a funeral procession going the opposite direction. It's a procession they could probably hear well before they saw anybody. There would have been plenty of loud weeping and wailing in a crowd like this, echoing through the streets as the son's body was borne out through the gate. Mourners would have been asking forgiveness through their cries for any and all wrongs that they might have done to the dead young man during his life. The man would have died earlier that day, or perhaps during the night, as Jewish custom called for the dead to be buried the same day if possible. And his body would have been prepared by a few righteous women who would have anointed it and wrapped it in clean white clothing for burial. But only a few strong men would have been carrying the bier on which the body was laid, as getting close to this body and touching the platform that supported it made a person unclean. Jesus did not care about the danger of becoming unclean when he approached and touched the bier holding the young man's body. He understood the agony of the young man's mother, the widow. When he told her, "Do not weep," he was not flip about it. He knew that the woman was weeping for far more than the loss of her beloved son. You see, we live in an age of insurance. We are used to preparing ourselves against loss. It doesn't always work very well, but we have insurance. Look at the idea of life insurance. It is designed to compensate for the earning potential of a lost loved one, to compensate for debt where the ability to repay is gone, to allow for life after loss so that the loss is felt less. But life insurance seems like a misnomer to me. Nothing can replace the life that is lost. Nothing can fill the space left behind by the relationships so suddenly severed when a person dies. Still, life insurance does ensure that some kind of life will be able to continue after one kind of life is over. There was no life insurance in Jesus' day. There was no life insurance 850 years before Jesus' day either. And today we read two stories about women who experienced a great loss. One of them 2,000 years ago, and one of them 2,850 years ago. The loss we see most easily in these women is the tragic and gut-wrenching loss of their sons. One widowed woman has watched her only son die, and the other believes that that is what's happening before her very eyes. Loss of a child at any age has to be the most difficult kind of loss there is. But because there is no insurance, and because these women live in societies where a woman's complete identity and ability to provide for herself comes from the men that she is related to, these women find themselves in very dire situations. They have not just lost their sons, they have lost everything their sons inherited from their dead husbands. They have lost their house, their name, their animals, their land, any ability to make a living, aside from begging or turning to prostitution. They have lost everything. They face life with nothing. There is no husband's brother to marry them, or it would have happened already. They see their lives as forfeit. All has been for nothing. Here in this congregation, there are people who have been through tremendous loss, much like the widows in today's stories. You know what it is like. Loss of a person who has been incredibly important in your life, even if they are not a child, leaves a hole that cannot be filled. Healing may come, comfort may come, but the loss cannot be replaced. The healing happens around the edge of that hole. There is only scar tissue and new people and new relationships. Life goes on, but life is suddenly very different. When I was 16, my best friend in the world was killed. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in April. We had been together for a while after lunch and made plans to take in a movie and go bowling in the evening. During youth group at church that afternoon, I heard sirens, lots of sirens. Later, after I had gone home for supper, I waited for the phone call from Danny, but he never called. I tried calling his house, but there was no answer. I did not find out what had happened until the next afternoon after school. When I did, all of life changed. Danny's blood was splattered indelibly across the highway a little over a half mile from our house. He had bounced off one car and been run over by the second. This highway was the most logical road for us to take to go almost anywhere that we went on a regular basis, so I had to get used to driving over Danny's blood. Rain and snow and ice did not wash it away. Only time and traffic made it fade. It was still there when I went off to college 2.5 years later. Danny never went to college. When I came home from school, the highway had been repaved, thankfully. Many of you know that this is how it is. Nothing makes that stain go away. And every day it reminds you of the startling difference between life then and life now. It's natural for us to grieve what is gone. But this is a reality that we all face, not just those of us who have recently lost loved ones. No, we all face this reality. We don't think about it as much as we should, and we need to be reminded. that as followers of Jesus Christ, we have all lost our lives. Not a child, a spouse, or a friend, as tragic as that is, but we have lost absolutely everything. We've left it all behind. It's back in Egypt, burned up, drowned in the Red Sea, back on the other side of our baptismal waters. We are refugees on our way to somewhere, we're not sure where half the time, just wandering around in the desert. We were so close to all that stuff. Sometimes we are still close to all that stuff. But here comes Jesus. He can hear us weeping and wailing a long ways off. He knows what's coming down the road. He knows the story from Elijah. He knows how scary it is to be a widow in his society. His mother is a widow dependent on her sons. And Jesus knows what it is to lose everything. He has compassion. Jesus walks up to our funeral bier and he touches it. Do not weep, he says. And then he says, get up. You see, you and I, we are both the woman and her dead son. We face the loss of everything we know to be our life, and we are dead. But Jesus reminds us, what you are going through is normal. It is healthy. Do not fear death. Do not fear the loss of everything you know. It is behind you now. I give you new life. Behold, I make all things new. Every friend you have, they are new friends. Every family member you embrace them as if they were new family members. The old has passed away. The new has come. Why is that crowd following Jesus so happy, so excited? It's hard to follow Jesus. Yes, it is hard to follow him sometimes, but we are following after all. And that means wherever we go, he has gone there ahead of us.